Ethan Rivers pressed his palms against the cold window of his small apartment, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white through the rain. At 28, he had mastered the art of loneliness. His days were spent analyzing celestial data at the Meridian Observatory, searching for patterns in the cosmos that might explain the fundamental questions of existence. His nights were spent here, in this cramped one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of a building that creaked with age and neglect. The apartment was sparse but functional. A single bed pushed against one wall, a desk cluttered with star charts and data tablets, and a closet door that never quite closed properly. Ethan had learned to ignore the small imperfections of his living space, just as he had learned to ignore the growing void in his chest, where human connection should have been. Tonight felt different somehow. The air held a strange static quality, like the moment before lightning strikes. Ethan attributed it to the storm rolling through the city. But something deeper whispered that tonight would change everything. He moved away from the window and settled at his desk, pulling up the latest data from the deep space array. Numbers and graphs filled his screen, the familiar comfort of quantifiable information. He lost himself in the work, fingers dancing across the holographic keyboard as he processed signals from distant galaxies. That was when he heard it, a soft, almost musical sound coming from his closet. Not quite breathing, but something rhythmic and alive. Ethan froze, his rational mind immediately cataloging possibilities. A mouse, perhaps, or water dripping from a leak he had not noticed. But the sound was too deliberate, too patterned to be random. He stood slowly, his heart beginning to race despite his attempts to remain calm. The closet door was slightly ajar, and through the narrow gap he could see something glowing. A faint violet light pulsed in the darkness, keeping time with that strange breathing sound. Ethan reached for the closet door, his hand trembling slightly. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that there was a perfectly logical explanation. Yet every instinct screamed that he was about to cross a threshold from which there would be no return dot. He pulled the door open. The violet light intensified, and Ethan stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. When his vision adjusted, he found himself staring at something impossible. Nestled among his forgotten winter coats and old shoes was a vessel. Not a ship in any conventional sense, but a crystalline structure no larger than a shoebox, its surface rippling with colors that seemed to exist outside the normal spectrum. And there, emerging from a crack in the crystal, were two eyes. They were enormous relative to the tiny face they belonged to, glowing with an inner light that shifted between violet and silver. Ethan watched in stunned silence as a figure climbed through the opening. She was small, impossibly small, standing no more than 4 inches tall. Her form was humanoid, but distinctly alien. Her skin held a faint luminescence, like moonlight on water, and her hair floated around her head as if underwater, defying gravity in gentle waves of deep purple. She wore what appeared to be a form-fitting suit made of the same crystalline material as her ship, and when she looked up at him, those huge violet eyes met his with an intelligence that was undeniable and profound. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Ethan felt his entire understanding of the universe shift and recalibrate. He was an astrophysicist. He had spent years studying the possibility of extraterrestrial life, running calculations on the probability of intelligent species existing in the vast cosmos. Yet nothing had prepared him for this moment, for the reality of a tiny alien girl standing in his closet, looking at him with what appeared to be equal parts curiosity and apprehension. The girl raised one small hand, palm forward, in what Ethan recognized as a universal gesture of peace. Then something extraordinary happened. Words formed in his mind, not spoken aloud, but somehow placed directly into his consciousness. The sensation was gentle, like a thought that was not quite his own. Please do not be afraid. My vessel was damaged. I crashed here by accident. I mean, you no harm, Dot. Ethan sank to his knees, bringing himself closer to her level. His scientific training warred with his overwhelming sense of wonder. 1,000 questions crowded his mind, but what emerged from his lips was surprisingly simple. Who are you? The tiny being tilted her head, and Ethan could have sworn he saw relief in those glowing eyes. Again, words appeared in his mind, accompanied by a warmth that felt almost like emotion that my name would be unpronounceable in your language. But you may call me Nyx. I come from a world you call the Velvet Nebula, though we have different names for it. I am a scout, an explorer, though perhaps now I am simply lost. Ethan slowly extended his hand, palm up, on the floor between them. Nyx regarded it for a moment before stepping forward, her movements graceful despite her obvious injury. One of her legs dragged slightly, and the glow of her suit flickered in places, revealing small cracks. You are hurt, Ethan said softly, surprised by the concern in his own voice. He had spent so long isolated from others that he had forgotten what it felt like to worry about someone else. Nyx placed one tiny hand on his palm, and Ethan felt a tingle of energy pass between them. Her touch was warm, alive, real. The crash damaged more than my ship, but I will heal, given time. The question is, will you help me, Ethan Rivers? Or will you alert your authorities to my presence? Ethan stared at the tiny being in his hand, at the trust she was placing in him by revealing her name and her vulnerability. In that moment, looking into eyes that held the light of distant stars, he made a choice that would alter the course of his life forever. I will help you, he whispered. I promise. The first 3 days after discovering Nyx were the strangest of Ethan's life. He called in sick to the observatory, something he had never done in 5 years of employment. His supervisor sounded genuinely concerned, which only highlighted how predictable and isolated his existence had been. But how could he explain that he was staying home to care for a 4-inch tall alien who had crashed in his closet? Ethan had carefully moved Nyx and her damaged vessel to his desk, clearing away months of research papers and data tablets to create a safe space for her. Using a magnifying glass and steady hands, he had examined her injuries. The fracture in her leg appeared to be healing on its own, the luminescent quality of her skin gradually returning to the damaged area. Her suit, however, was another matter entirely. The crystal matrix is broken, Nyx explained, her telepathic voice now familiar in his mind. She sat on a stack of books, her injured legs stretched out before her. Without it, I cannot regulate my body's energy properly. On my world, we draw sustenance from stellar radiation, but here the sunlight is different, weaker. Ethan had spent hours researching solutions, applying his knowledge of physics in ways he never imagined. He rigged a small LED array that mimicked the ultraviolet spectrum Nyx described, positioning it near her makeshift living area. The first time he activated it, he watched in amazement as she lifted her face to the artificial light, her skin brightening with renewed vitality. Better? He asked aloud, still unused to the one-sided nature of their communication. Nyx could project thoughts into his mind, but he had to speak for her to understand him. She had explained that her people perceived sound as vibration patterns, translating them into meaning through their telepathic senses. Much better. You are remarkably clever, Ethan Rivers. Your species may lack our abilities, but your capacity for innovation is impressive. A warmth spread through Ethan's chest at her words. When was the last time someone had complimented him? When was the last time someone had even noticed him enough to form an opinion? Over the following days, they fell into a routine. Ethan would prepare his own meals, and through careful experimentation, they discovered that Nyx could consume tiny amounts of fruit. He watched in fascination as she held a grain-sized piece of strawberry, the juice staining her small fingers as she ate with obvious delight. Do your people not eat food? Ethan asked, slicing another strawberry into microscopic portions with a razor blade. Not like this. We absorb energy directly from our sun, from the radiation of our nebula. But this, she held up the fruit, it has something our nourishment lacks: flavor, texture, the joy of taste. We have no concept of such things. That sounds lonely, Ethan said quietly. Nyx set down the fruit and looked at him, her violet eyes seeming to peer into his soul. It is all we have ever known. But yes, I think perhaps it is lonely. Just as I think your life has been lonely. Despite being surrounded by billions of your kind, Ethan felt exposed by her observation, but not uncomfortable. There was no judgment in her words, only understanding. He sat down at his desk, bringing his face level with where she stood. Why did you come here? He asked. To Earth, I mean. What were you looking for? Nyx was silent for a moment, her expression thoughtful. When she finally answered, Ethan sensed a vulnerability in her mental voice that had not been there before. My people are dying. Ethan, not in body, but in spirit. We have lived for thousands of your years in perfect logic and efficiency. We communicate directly, mind to mind. There are no misunderstandings, no conflicts, no chaos. But there is also no growth, no surprise, no passion. We exist, but we do not truly live. She walked to the edge of the book stack, looking out at his apartment with its cluttered humanity. I volunteered to study other species, to learn about emotion. Your people broadcast feelings into space like radiation. Love, anger, joy, grief. It is loud and chaotic and beautiful. I was trying to get closer, to understand it better when my ship malfunctioned. And then I crashed here, into your closet, into your life. And have you learned about emotions? Ethan asked softly. Nyx turned back to him, and he could swear he saw something like a smile on her tiny features. I am beginning to. Fear, when I first saw you. Relief, when you chose to help rather than harm me. Gratitude, as you have cared for me these past days. And something else, something I do not yet have words for. Ethan felt his heart skip. He had spent 3 days in the constant company of this tiny being, and already he could not imagine his apartment without her presence. The silence that had once been his constant companion now felt oppressive when she was resting. He found himself hurrying home from brief trips to the store, eager to continue their conversations. He had built her a habitat using an empty terrarium he had found in storage, lining it with soft cloth and adding miniature furniture constructed from matchboxes and bottle caps. Nyx had been delighted, exploring every corner with childlike wonder. Watching her examine the thimble as if it were a piece of fine art had made Ethan laugh, a sound that felt foreign in his own throat. I feel it too, Ethan admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. That's something else. He reached out slowly, extending his index finger toward her. Nyx stepped forward and placed both of her small hands on his fingertip. The connection sent a tingle through his entire arm, and suddenly he could feel what she felt. Warmth, curiosity, affection, and beneath it all, a growing attachment that mirrored his own. Your people call it connection, Nyx said softly. The bond between two beings who see each other truly, without pretense or walls. I think I am beginning to understand why your species values it so highly, even when it brings pain. Does it have to bring pain? Ethan asked, eventually. Perhaps. I must repair my ship. I must return home to share what I have learned. And you must return to your life, to your work, to your world. The thought of Nyx leaving created an ache in Ethan's chest that he had not anticipated. In just 3 days, this tiny alien girl had become the center of his world. She had brought light to his darkness, purpose to his isolation, wonder to his routine existence. What if I don't want to go back to that life? He said quietly. What if I want this instead? Conversations that matter, connections that feel real, even if they are impossible? Nothing about this is impossible, Ethan. It is simply unexpected. Nix's mental voice held a gentleness that made his eyes sting. You have shown me what emotion feels like. You have been patient with my questions, generous with your care, kind despite having every reason to be afraid. You have given me more than data to bring home. You have given me friendship. Is that what this is? Ethan asked, though he suspected they both knew it was growing into something more. Nix squeezed his fingertip with her tiny hands. And through their connection, he felt the depth of her affection. Uncomplicated by the confusion that plagued human relationships. It is a beginning, she said simply. And beginnings are precious things. They stayed like that for a long time, connected by touch and thought. Two impossibly different beings, finding common ground in the simple truth that loneliness recognized loneliness. And that sometimes the universe conspired to bring together exactly the right souls, regardless of size or species. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. But inside Ethan's small apartment, something unprecedented was taking root. A bond that defied logic, transcended physical limitations, and proved that connection needed no grand gestures or perfect circumstances. Sometimes it only needed two beings, willing to see each other clearly and choose to stay. 2 weeks had passed since Nix's arrival, and Ethan's apartment had transformed into something he never thought possible. A home. The terrarium habitat he had built for her now sat prominently on his desk, surrounded by carefully arranged tools and materials. Together, they had been working on repairing her crystalline vessel, though progress was slow. The technology was so far beyond human understanding that Ethan often felt like a child playing with blocks. But Nix guided him with patience and encouragement. Tonight, however, something had shifted. Ethan could feel it in the way Nix moved through her miniature space. Her usual graceful confidence replaced by an agitated energy. She paced back and forth across the small platform he had built for her violet eyes distant and troubled. Nix, what's wrong? Ethan asked, setting down the microscopic soldering tool he had been using. You have been quiet all evening. She stopped pacing and looked up at him. Even after 2 weeks, the sight of her still took his breath away. She was so small, so delicate, yet she radiated a presence that filled the entire room. Her hair floated in its perpetual gentle wave, and her skin glowed softly in the lamplight. The ship is nearly repaired, she said finally, her mental voice barely a whisper. Another few days, perhaps a week, and it will be functional enough to send a distress signal to my people. They will come for me. Ethan felt his stomach drop. He had known this moment would come, had been preparing himself for it every day, yet hearing the words made it devastatingly real. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his tools. That is good news, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. You will be able to go home, to share everything you have learned. Nix flew up from her platform, her small form hovering in the air through some ability Ethan still did not fully understand. She moved closer to his face, stopping just inches from his eyes. The glow of her skin cast gentle shadows across his features. Is it good news, Ethan? Because when I think about leaving, about returning to my world of perfect logic and emotionless efficiency, I feel something sharp inside me. Something that hurts. Is this what your people call heartache? Ethan's throat tightened. Over the past 2 weeks, they had grown closer than he thought possible. Their evening conversations had stretched late into the night, discussing everything from quantum mechanics to the nature of consciousness, to the simple pleasure of watching rain fall against windows. Nix had begun to understand human emotions, not just intellectually, but experientially. And Ethan had learned that love required no specific form or size, only genuine connection. Yes, he whispered. That is heartache. It is what happens when we must lose something precious to us. I do not want to lose this, Nick said, and Ethan could hear the desperation in her mental voice. I do not want to lose you. In my world, we have partnerships based on compatibility and logic. But this, what we have created here, this is something my people have no words for. You have taught me to feel, Ethan Rivers, and now I cannot imagine returning to a life without feeling. Ethan slowly extended his hand, palm up, and Nyx descended to rest in it. The warmth of her small body against his skin had become his favorite sensation. He brought her closer to his face, close enough to see the individual strands of her floating hair, the intricate patterns of light beneath her skin. I love you, he said simply, the words feeling both inadequate and perfect. I know it is impossible. I know we are from different worlds, different species. I know that by every rational measure. This makes no sense. But I love you, Nyx. These 2 weeks with you have been more alive than the 28 years before them. Tears formed in Nyx's enormous eyes, actual tears that reflected the light like tiny diamonds. Ethan had not known her people could cry. On my world, we do not have this word, love. We have words for partnership, for cooperation, for mutual benefit. But this feeling, this overwhelming desire to remain in your presence, to share your joys and ease your sorrows, to build a life together despite all obstacles. I think this is what your people mean when they speak of love. And I feel it too, Ethan. I feel it with every particle of my being. They stayed like that, human and alien, impossibly different yet perfectly matched, letting the weight of their confession settle between them. But their moment of peace was shattered by a sudden, brilliant flash of light that filled the apartment. Ethan jumped to his feet, carefully cradling Nyx against his chest protectively. Through his window, he could see 3 crystalline vessels hovering in the night sky, each one significantly larger than Nyx's damaged ship. They pulsed with the same violet light, and Ethan knew immediately what they were. Your people, he breathed. Nyx pressed herself against his chest, and he could feel her trembling. They found me. The signal from my ship must have been stronger than I realized. They have come to retrieve me. A beam of light shot down from the central vessel, and 3 figures materialized in Ethan's apartment. They were similar to Nyx in appearance, but larger, each standing about 8 inches tall. Their presence radiated authority and cold efficiency. Their eyes, while the same violet as Nyx's, held no warmth, no curiosity, only clinical assessment. The central figure, a male with sharp features and hair that seemed to be made of crystallized light, stepped forward. His mental voice filled the room, far more powerful and invasive than Nyx's gentle communication. Scout Nyxara of the Velvet Nebula, you have been located. Your prolonged silence caused concern. Prepare for immediate extraction and debriefing. No, Ethan said aloud, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. He held Nyx closer. She does not want to go. The 3 aliens turned their attention to him, and Ethan felt the full weight of their collective consciousness pressing against his mind. It was overwhelming, like standing before a tidal wave of pure thought. Human, you do not understand our ways. Nyxara is a valued member of our society. She has duties, responsibilities. Her personal desires are irrelevant to the greater purpose. That is exactly what is wrong with your society, Ethan said, his voice growing stronger. Nyx came here to study emotions, to understand what your people were missing. Well, she found it. She found connection, joy, love. Things that your perfect logic cannot quantify or control. Nyx flew from his hand, positioning herself between Ethan and her people. Her small form glowed brighter than he had ever seen, and when she spoke, her mental voice was clear and unwavering. Commander Theron, I submit my findings. Human emotions are not weaknesses to be studied and dismissed. They are the foundation of a life worth living. I have experienced fear and joy, loneliness and connection, pain and love. And I choose to stay. I choose him. I choose feeling over efficiency, chaos over perfect order, life over mere existence. The commander's expression remained unchanged, but Ethan sensed a ripple of something. Perhaps shock from the other two aliens. No scout has ever requested to remain with the subject species. This is unprecedented. That is because no scout has ever truly understood what they were studying, Nix replied. I am not asking for permission, Commander. I am informing you of my decision. I will send you my complete research, everything I have learned about human emotion and connection. But I will not return. This human, Ethan Rivers, has shown me what it means to truly live, and I refuse to give that up. A tense silence filled the room. Ethan held his breath, afraid that any movement might shatter whatever delicate balance Nix was trying to maintain. Finally, Commander Theron spoke again, his mental voice containing the faintest hint of something that might have been curiosity. If we allow this, you understand you will be alone. No other member of our species will be permitted to join you. You will be isolated from our collective, living among beings who age and die in what we consider mere moments. I will not be alone, Nix said softly, glancing back at Ethan. And perhaps a short life filled with genuine feeling is worth more than an eternity of empty existence. Perhaps that is the lesson our people need to learn. The three aliens conferred silently among themselves, their thoughts closed off, even to Nix. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, Commander Theron nodded, a gesture he must have learned from observing humans very well. Your choice is noted and accepted. We will designate you as a long-term observer, a bridge between our species. Your research will be invaluable. But understand, Nixara, there is no reversing this decision. I understand, Nix said, and I have never been more certain of anything in my existence. The three aliens dissolved into light and vanished, their ships departing as silently as they had arrived. Ethan and Nix were left alone in the sudden quiet of his apartment. The weight of what had just transpired settling over them. Ethan sank into his chair, his legs no longer able to support him. Nix flew to his shoulder, settling there as she had begun to do in recent days, her favorite perching spot. You gave up everything, Ethan whispered. Your world, your people, immortality. For me, for us, Nix corrected. For the chance to build something new, something unprecedented. Your species has a saying, home is where the heart is. I have learned what it means to have a heart, Ethan, and my heart is here. With you. Ethan turned his head, bringing his cheek close to her small form. She pressed her tiny hand against his skin, and through their connection, he felt the depth of her commitment, her love, her absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. We will figure this out, he promised. The logistics, the differences, all of it. We will build a life together, however impossible it seems. Nothing is impossible, Nix said, her mental voice filled with warmth and hope. You and I are proof of that. We are a bridge between worlds, between species, between loneliness and love. And that is the greatest discovery of all. Outside, the city lights sparkled like distant stars, and inside Ethan's small apartment, two beings from impossibly different worlds began their journey together. It would not be easy. There would be challenges neither could foresee. But they would face them together, proving that love transcends all boundaries. That connection needs no permission from logic or convention. And that sometimes the smallest beings carry the largest capacity for courage and hope. The universe was vast and filled with wonders, but none more wondrous than the simple truth that two souls, against all odds, had found each other in the darkness and chosen to create their own light.